story. This implosion is going to affect us all. Strong words from UDM leader Bantu Holomisa, who says that an interim government until the next elections in 2024 might save us from what he calls comrades in corruption. Holomisa says the ANC must hand over power to the Constitutional Court to form a temporary government or an interim government. He was speaking to my colleague Jane Dutton here on eNCA yesterday. He says it will also give the ANC time to self-correct outside of government structures. Let's get some analysis now in the midday view with Ebrahim Fakir. He's the director of programs at the Auwal Socio-Economic Research Institute. Ebrahim, good afternoon and thank you very much. Thanks for joining us here in the midday view. Just firstly, an overriding question. I mean, an interim government, under what circumstances could it happen in South Africa in terms of our constitutional democracy?
Hi, Dan. It's a strange idea that in the middle of a term of office of a democratically elected, legitimate government, that there is a call for an interim government. Now, let's not have any doubt. The credibility of the operations of this government is certainly in question. And there's a major credibility crisis. But that doesn't equate to a crisis of legitimation. So it's not an illegitimate government. And that's probably one of the only times in which you would have a transitionary mechanism such as an interim government. So what I'm saying in short, Dan, is that, it's not a spectral war. There isn't general insurrection in the streets. There isn't a situation, of course we've got a pandemic, but we've got a state of disaster to cater for that eventuality. We don't have generalized insurrection or major social disorder and so on, right? Nor do we have, as was the case in 1990 to 1994, a period of a grand societal shift or transition from a mode of government of apartheid towards democratization and towards democracy. So none of those features are here. And that's the only point of time at which you would have or entertain the idea of a so-called interim government. Now, of course, because of this credibility crisis there, and we know that the ANC's factionalism from 2005, so close on to a decade and a half ago, their factionalism has infected and imputed the entire public service and has held back their operations. You find institutional meddling, but that's a crisis of credibility which voters have an opportunity to elect that government out of office in the next election. So, yes, there's problems. Yes, sometimes even the disorder and the factionalism inside the ANC spills out onto the streets, as we saw in the streets of Pretoria and other parts of the country where internal factions, unhappiness with the selection of a mayoral candidate and so on can spill over on the streets and affect the public. It is essentially an internal problem. The police, the security forces have to take care of that. Government has to take care of that. The internal problems of the ANC is the ANC's. They must fight it out. It's not our business, and you cannot have a mechanism such as this to cater to the eventuality of internal problems in a party. So I'm actually struck that we're entertaining this discussion, actually.
Well, I just wanted us to have it because we saw after the interview yesterday with the UDM leader and my colleague Jane Dutton what happened on social media, all kinds of comments, and people, some of them raising some of the questions that we are raising, but we just wanted your expert insight into this. I just felt that it was important to do because the way it comes across from his perspective, what I heard was that we could face some bloodshed here because the ANCs of internal factions not stepping aside. There are claims of calling for a national shutdown by the governing party. How are you the governing party and you're calling for a national shutdown? So we should be avoiding a possible bloodshed. Maybe we need an interim government.
No, of course not. I mean, Dan, if that was the qualifying criteria for an interim government, tell me you cannot remember what happened on the streets of Tshwane when a mayoral candidate was supposedly imposed on the ANC for Pretoria or for Tshwane. What happened in the streets? Days of mayhem, loss of life. There's been successive incidents going past from 2005, where this has infected the public and has worse infected the public service. So you've got public servants who either work to undermine their colleagues or undermine ministerial instructions because the minister is from a faction, and hold back budgetary rollout, hold back policy implementation, blunt oversight because you don't want oversight to happen in institutions. All of that has happened. Worse still, it has spilled over into bloodshed on the streets, loss of life, insurrection generally, but limited to their internal factions. It hasn't yet infected the whole of society. Make no mistake, the ANC would like us to believe, and maybe some of its factions do, even those organized outside of it in organizational form, such as the UDM and the EFF, that their problems are our problems and we must make it our problems. No, as I say, the public service regulations, the governance architecture makes provision for the security establishment, for intelligence services, for all kinds of the police and a whole range of other public service instruments to intervene in moments where public servants don't do their jobs. Okay. So internal supervision. When these things spill out onto the street, the police and the security forces and the intelligence services have to play their role. We know there's an extent to which they are factionalized too, and they play this role of factions. But why should we, as a public, have to give leeway and give in to the factions of the ANC, give them time to sort themselves out? No, we voters, if we believe so strongly that this is the problem, then we've got to vote them out of office. Because as I say, the credibility of this government may certainly be under question. Absolutely. There's a major credibility crisis. It isn't, as I say, a legitimation crisis.
Thank you very much, Ebrahim, for those insights at this hour. No need for an interim government. Ebrahim Fakir, Director of Programs at the Auwal Socio-Economic Research Institute.